Welcome back, all you galactic monkeys. Are you ready to get into the affirmation? Okay, let's get right into it. White rhythmic wind. I organize in order to communicate. Balancing breath. I seal the input of spirit with the rhythmic tone of equality, and I am guided by my own power doubled. I actually want to start with I'm guided by my own power doubled. Like I said before, and I touched in when we were talking about the magnetic earth, magnetic, rhythmic, and spectral, each one of them has a 1 on top. They're known as the unit 1 codes, or the 1 unit codes. And, magnetic is 1, rhythmic is a bar, which is 5, and then a dot, which is 1 on top. And then 11, or spectral, is 2 bars, which is 5, 5, which is 10, and a 1 on top, which is 11. So everything with a 1 on top of it is guided by its own power doubled. More on those oracular dynamics in a very specified video. And I bring that to bear because the wind is guided by the wind energy. It is itself today. It is guiding itself. And this is why I organize in order to communicate. We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier in the Wayspo portion. And it's like the communication or the motion, the spirit within a thing, that vibration might be kind of locked in a situation. So as we start organizing, moving those terrestrial or non-terrestrial kind of objects, associations around, it starts to communicate with itself. The structure starts to communicate. In a more kind of separate function, we may start to communicate something to someone else once something starts to move and get organized. But in the larger picture, because we're all one, the system is really communicating with itself as that organization begins to begins to take effect. Balancing breath. And so as that organization happening, the communication is coming out, but maybe like as a situational, maybe like before there was something you wanted to speak to someone, and you could only really think about one aspect of it. Maybe you were a little intimidated about communication. Maybe you were intimidating about triggering someone. Sometimes communication can be hard, especially when you're wanting to communicate something of a tender issue or something's hard for someone. Maybe you want patterns to change. It's hard to say what it is, but the reason I touch on that is because of sensitive communication, and I feel it's a good representation here. Balancing breath. It's like as the organization, as that communication begins to move, the energy that is within you, because you're part of that immaculate organization, the breath or communication, the almost output or rhythmic energy of that communication begins to be balanced. So it's no longer just about what you want to say. All of a sudden there's the other electromagnetic pressure of the other being engaged. So there's a hyper-consciousness, a kind of pseudo-telepathy that forms because now there is a merging of collective consciousness. There's 2 or more people engaging, and so it's not just necessarily how you thought or projected it to be, because now there's other elements. No, that's the balance of the organization, whether or not the situation itself actually is a balanced situation in our own opinion. I feel this is the movement of energy. I organize in order to communicate, balancing breath. This could bring illumination to us choosing to balance our own breath so as not to speak too much or not to do too much. Maybe we have a big music project or a big speakers project for an audience that we have to say, and you have to go for quite a long time. And so you have to balance how you're sharing, how you're outputting. As a breath meditation, a balanced breath could represent a harmony in the body. And as we organize the input and output of our body, that allows our energy body and our psyche to begin communicating through a balanced breath. This is a very breath work, or actually kind of a breath wave kind of frequency, as well as the meditations that are being offered here as the Mayan pyramid section. It is the same, the balanced breath, how the breath becomes balanced, touches the body, touches the energy centers, brings and shares that prana. Also Vipassana, if any of you are familiar with Vipassana, these are all three very amazing breath practices. The breath wave, Vipassana, and the Mayan pyramid meditation all actually overlap very deeply. In fact, I find the abstract components of breathwave and the abstract components of Vipassana actually join in a more exact format within the Mayan pyramid meditation, which is really cool that it naturally formed like that. Now, I seal the input of spirit with the rhythmic tone of equality. So the spirit, there's a life to something, that which breathes life into. I seal the spirit with the rhythmic tone of equality. That spirit comes into a thing as equality. If there's a communication which is not necessarily balanced, maybe it's dominant. Well, the spirit, that natura, that spirit that wants to breathe life into something can't really be present, because that, as expressed by like the equality, is an equanimous function. When equality, I find, is very paramount to synchronicity. Things have been equalized. There's nothing better or worse. There's nothing stronger or weaker on the so-called playing field or field. And so the spiritus can show up, because the spirit of things is actually an innocent and accurate representation of the inhabiting consciousness within a field effect, or the effect of the goings on in the atmosphere or space. I organize in order to communicate balancing breath. I seal the input of spirit with the rhythmic tone of equality. And so we take on the ability to equalize. And just to touch on something too, which is interesting, this is the only word, I believe, that is shared twice. Equality is represented by the rhythmic tone, and equality is also represented by the world bridger, which is the sign of death, even though it's equalized. This is equality, and that is equalized. And just to bring in on that, because equalize is kind of like the death. Okay, there's too much of this, so that gets cut out, and the field is now equalized. Right? If you take a look at a mixer, a DJ mixer, you have 3 bands, high, mid, and low, and it's called your equalizer. And so you're adjusting, you're tuning a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, to equalize the frequencies of, say, track A and track B. Or if you're a more complex DJ, track A, B, C, and D on 4 decks, or whatnot. And so this different way of equality and equalization, the finalization of equality, you may have to go through a process of conscious equalization, kind of bringing that. You may have to sacrifice something of yourself to be equalized. You may have to let something go. These are just different analogies, right? Different analogies. Nothing precisely exact, just a broad spectrum of how these energies show up. And I'm guided by my own power doubled. So this wind energy is very, very present today in the way that is shown up here. I organize in order to communicate balancing breath. I seal the input of spirit with the rhythmic tone of equality. And I am guided by my own power doubled. Well, that feels good. I'm going to leave us all with that as our affirmation section. Stay tuned for the oracle section.